Hello and welcome to the Nugget Guide for childcare schemes in England. We're going to be talking today about funded childcare hours and tax-free childcare. And we've just been getting so many questions, I think, because lots of you are applying for these new hours, 15 hours for 9 months old in January, September, January, April. And I just wanted to have one place where we try and answer as many questions as possible. The funded childcare hours that we're talking about in this session are only applicable to England currently, but we do have a benefits for baby session for Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland specifically next week. So if you want to attend that, just go to the events section on our website and sign up there. I will be talking about tax-free childcare in this session towards the end, and that is a UK-wide scheme. So you might want to just skip through to the end if you're from a devolved nation and want to hear more about that. Otherwise, sign up for our session next week, and it's just dedicated to all the benefits that you can receive when you're pregnant and after having a baby in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland, because it is slightly different to England. The other thing I just wanted to flag is I've done as much research into this as possible. Also, my 2-year-old has been through both schemes, so I've used both myself. So I've tried to answer as many questions as possible, but we don't have a direct line with the Department of Education, unlike groups like Pregnant and Screwed. So it's really worth following them for really up-to-date advice, because sometimes the goalposts do change or there are delays in the system. I know there are a couple of delays with getting codes at the moment. Pregnant and Screwed will be able to give you the most up-to-date advice, and are really, really worth a follow if you are about to use these schemes. But nonetheless, this should be a really helpful session. I've tried to answer as many people's questions as possible. So let's dive into it. So we've got funded childcare hours. This is the scheme of the moment, I think, that everyone's talking about, because they're introducing 15 hours a week from 9 months starting this September. And this is going to be increased to 30 hours a week from 9 months starting in September 2025. Labour have committed to rolling out these hours. It was in their manifesto, so we're fully expecting them to continue with this rollout. Also to note that at 3 to 4 years, there are 15 hours universal. So 15 hours which aren't means tested. Doesn't matter what you earn to access those 15 hours at 3. And you could get 30 hours currently for your 3 to 4-year-old if you are eligible for the 15 hours for working parents plus 15 hours universal equals 30 hours. I'll explain a bit more about those a bit later. But just wanted to explain why we call them funded hours, not free hours. And I think it's because we feel like 3 hours is slightly gaslighty and potentially not an accurate description of how lots of parents use these hours. So while some people will be able to access these hours completely for free, the majority of people won't be. So for example, these hours are just term time only. So if you want to use the hours across the year, if you work the whole year and you need childcare across the whole year, then most settings, most nurseries and childminders will let you stretch the hours. So 15 hours typically becomes 11 and a half, sometimes 10 and a half, depends on what your nursery says. You can use these funded hours for registered childminders and nurseries, but not all childcare providers don't have to offer them. So it's whether they do. So you have to check with your childcare provider whether they're on offer, and also how they use them, if they have any conditions on using them, because we've been hearing that some providers need you to be in using the days, like 2 days a week, to then use the funded hours on top. So just check what the rules are. Also, there are lots of places now charging for consumables, so consumable fees as extra. And this is really intended to make up the shortfall between funding and the amount necessary to keep the nursery open, because these hours are underfunded. So don't be surprised if you see that on your bill. It is quite common practice currently, and it's used to pay for things like meals, nappies, lotion, activities, art, day trips, that kind of thing. And why do they need to charge these? As I said, the scheme is underfunded. So, for example, for providing the 3 to 4 year old funded hours, the universal ones, average nursery loses £32,000 by subsidising those hours. So that's why you might see extra charges like consumable fees on your bill. And there has been an increase in demand due to the provision of these funded hours. And you may be aware that lots of providers have been closing down because of rising costs, lack of staff, trying to find the people to run the nursery. So we recommend working out who your childcare provider is going to be as soon as possible and putting your name down on lists. Some areas are going to be more oversubscribed than others, but it's just worth getting all your ducks in a row and signing your child up or putting them on a waiting list sooner rather than later, but just because of the high demand. So how do you apply? Essentially, you need to set up a childcare account. Really easy to do. Just type in childcare account HMRC and it will come up and follow the steps. It's not too hard. And the childcare account that you set up for funded hours is exactly the same childcare account you need for your tax-free childcare. So it all comes out of one account, which is quite nice. Once you apply, you have to give them various details about you and your partner, including what you are earning. I'll explain about that in a bit more detail in a minute. And then you may find out that you're eligible straight away, but it can take up to 7 days. As I said a bit at the beginning, there also has been some delays on the codes as well. So don't be surprised if it's slightly over 7 days. And then once you have your code, you give your code to your provider. And then they might ask for additional information from you, like your national insurance number, things like that. And then you sort it out with them from there. If you already have a tax-free childcare account, as I said, it's the same account for funded hours. So once you become eligible, when you reconfirm your details, so every 3 months, you have to go onto your childcare account and just click, yes, I'm still eligible. My earnings are still within the limits and I'm still eligible for these funded schemes. Once you reconfirm your details, you will receive a code, and that is your funded childcare code. I'm going to skip over that for a minute. Term times. So funded hours run on these term times. So 1st of January, 1st of April, 1st of September. And children are eligible for the hours the term after they turn 9 months or they turn 3, for example. So with the September hours coming up, if you have a child who is born, who's 9 months on August the 31st, then they'll be eligible for the funded hours on September 1st. If your child is born on September the 1st, they won't be eligible for the hours until January 1st. So when do you apply? Essentially, it's just a couple of months before you're going to be eligible for those hours. You don't want to leave it too late because your provider will need the code in good time to give to the local authority to claim their funding. So, for example, if you're looking at the 1st of January, say your child is turning 9 months between the 1st of September and the 31st of December, then you want to apply middle of October towards the end of November, in between then. So anything else to say? I think I got a couple of questions as to why it's the term after, and instead of why can't they just get their funding as and when they turn 9 months old? And I think it's to do with accessing the funding. So the nurseries have to apply to the local authority with the number of children that are going on those funded hours, and then they get the money from the local authority. So it's quite a long process for them to claim. So they need to know how many people are claiming, and they can't do it all at different times. It wouldn't be efficient. So that's how they get their funding. Back to eligibility. So the eligibility for tax-free childcare and funded hours is the same. So if you're eligible for funded hours, you're going to be eligible for tax-free childcare. You and your partner must work a minimum of 16 hours a week at national minimum wage or above. Or in other words, you have to earn a minimum of £9,518 across a year individually, and you both individually have to earn under £100,000 per year. And this is net adjusted income, which I will explain in a minute. Are you still eligible on your mat leave? You are. If you have an older child who you and they are going to nursery, or they're 9 months or 2 or whatever, you can still use the schemes, no problem. The wage eligibility doesn't apply to you while you're on maternity leave. For tax-free childcare, you can open the account 31 days before you're due back on your leave, and I'll explain a bit more for the child that you're on maternity leave with, if you're applying for childcare for them. I'll explain in another slide because they've changed the rules on that. So what is net adjusted income? So it's your total taxable income. So that means that includes your bonuses, that includes your commission, everything that you're normally taxed on, minus things like trading losses, donations to charity, via gift aid, pensions, contributions which are paid gross. So if you're just over the £100,000 threshold, you might want to think about putting more money into your pension so that you then become eligible for these schemes, if it makes sense for you to do so, if you're going to be saving more money, and it makes financial sense. If you have an accountant, always a good question to ask them. Do you need access to public funds? So the person who applies must also have at least one of the following. So they must be a British or Irish citizen, settled or pre-settled, and they must they must have permission to access public funds. And then both parents must have national insurance numbers. But only one of you have to meet those requirements I said earlier. And then what happens if your earnings fluctuate in the year? So say, okay, Katie, I earn 80k, but sometimes I get a 30k bonus at the end of the year, and sometimes I get 10, and I don't know how I'm meant to know. When you are applying for these hours, you reconfirm your details every 3 months. So your wage, the wage criteria is on this current tax year that we're in at the moment. It's not based on the year before, it's this current one. So every 3 months, they're asking you to say, okay, take stock of the last 3 months. Are you still eligible? Do you think, knowing various things about your performance, what happened last year, like did you get a good commission last year? Is it likely to happen again? Have there been hints from your employer that you're going to get another big bonus? Take these considerations into account and then come to a reasonable conclusion. So if you think that that quarter's income is going to result in you exceeding the upper income limit, then you just shouldn't reconfirm your details again. And that means that you'll be taken off both of the schemes. So it's basically, you have to roll it out and work out as you get closer to the end of the year, like, have you made over or below the thresholds? And then if you have, just take yourself, or you think you will do, just take yourself back off the scheme. How do you work out your earnings? So how does HMRC know what you've been earning? First thing they'll do is check through your last 3 months of PAYE payslips. So just to flag a couple of things that don't count towards your minimum earnings, self-employed sisters, this is a good thing for you to know, because it nearly tripped me up. Well, it did trip me up. Dividends don't count towards your minimum earnings. So when I was finishing my business, my old business, and I started up Nugget, there was a period where I wasn't on PAYE, and technically I was only being paid dividends. So Harriet and I had to very quickly call our accountant to be like, help, can you backdate our PAYE and like put us on PAYE for the future, just so that I was eligible for these schemes. Also to know, interest doesn't count towards minimum earnings, pension payments, income from investing in property. Of course, it's not as simple as that, because conversely, they do count towards your maximum earnings. So dividends from company shares do count towards the upper limit of 100k net adjusted income. So be aware of that. If you're thinking, oh shit, well, I'm not on PAYE, how do I prove my earnings if I'm self-employed? As I said before, that's the first thing they're going to check. If you're not on PAYE, there are other ways to prove your income: wage slips, bank statements, a statement from your accountant, copies of invoices. This did happen to me, as I said, when I was in that funny little period between my old business and this one. And what happened was, when I reconfirmed my details, it said, flag, there's a problem. We can't confirm that you're making the money that you say you are. So we don't know at this stage if you're eligible. Here's the phone number, give us a call. So I rang them and they just said, okay, could you just send over, I think all I just had to do was just send screenshots of the income coming in from Nugget, and they were happy with that. And then I was allowed to reconfirm my details. And then in the interim, I put myself on PAYE pretty sharpish, so I didn't have to deal with that again. But my point is, don't worry, it's not like they're just going to cut you off. They give you a moment to explain yourself, or provide the proof that you are actually earning enough money. And it's okay. Don't panic too much. So applying on maternity leave, just to go back to the earlier points, and this screenshot is obviously from a while ago. This was on the Childcare Choices website, but this is what it will look like when you're applying for funded hours. And if you're on maternity leave, as it says here, it doesn't matter if your partner doesn't expect to earn this money if they're on maternity leave. So just be aware of that. HMRC is warning that a small number of parents on parental leave are receiving an error message on the online application system, which incorrectly says they're ineligible. And it just says, ignore this message, that you will still receive a letter in the post from HMRC within 2 weeks of applying, and that will give you your entitlement code. Once you get your code through the post, give that to your provider, and then eventually you will be sent a code on your online account. Your online account is your permanent account. So once you have that, just update your provider with the permanent code. I think that's that. Yes. So if you're returning to work after your maternity leave, so this is when you're applying for funded hours for the child that you're currently on maternity leave for. They've changed the rules. So previously it was 31 days before you're due to go back. Now it's this. So I just take a screenshot of this table. It was hidden in the Childcare Choices website, deep in the terms and conditions. So essentially, if you're applying for these September hours, so your child has turned 9 months before on or before the 31st of August, so they're going in September, you have to be returning to work by the 30th of September to access those hours. If you return to work after, even though your child is eligible, you will have to wait until the term after to access the funded hours. I know, it's so complicated. I hope that all makes sense. It's really difficult explaining this because there are so many uts and buts and uts. I don't know why they make it so complicated, but that is it. I'm just checking my notes to make sure. Yeah, that's it. If you apply online, you might have your status changed if you are returning back after maternity leave. Your status might change to pending. Don't worry, it just means that they will be sending you a letter. That's what that means. So just wait for them to send you a letter within 1 to 2 weeks. And what does returning to work actually look like? Well, what does it mean? So annual leave, if you're using annual leave, that means that you have finished, you have stopped your maternity leave. That has come to an end if you're using annual leave. So that counts as going back to work. But a kit day is work that you can do while still on your maternity leave. So that doesn't count as returning to work. So if you've got loads of annual leave that you've accrued and you wanted to extend your maternity leave and have a bit more time adjusting to your child going back into childcare and stuff like that, just use some of the annual leave. That does still count as you going back to work. 15 hours at 3. So these hours are universal. They're not means tested, as I said before, they're for every child. So you don't have to apply for these universal hours. The only hours you have to apply for are the means tested, hours, which are for working parents, so parents who are eligible in that wage stipulations. And then if you were going for 30 funded hours at 3, so that means you're eligible for the working 15 hours and you're getting the universal 15 hours at 3. If you already have a code, you don't need to apply for a new one. You just continue to reconfirm. This information was so difficult to find. I had to actually call them and be like, what is going on? And something to flag again, you'll get the 15 hours the term after your child turns 3. What if you're made redundant? Okay, so if you're made redundant, there is a grace period. And as always, it's complicated. So here is the table. I would screenshot this. I found it on a government website for the London Borough of Islington. But these are the rules, I guess, for Islington. I suspect they're the same across the country, but not 100%. But it just gives you an idea anyhow of what the grace period is. So if you and your partner lose your job, or your partner, and you no longer meet eligibility criteria, there's a grace period, and during this time your child will still continue to receive the hours. Once the grace period has ended, your child will no longer be eligible for the funded hours that are means tested. If they will always be eligible for the universal hours of 3. If you find a new job during the grace period and meet the eligibility criteria again, then you can continue to receive funded hours without a problem. And then the length of the grace period depends on when in the year that you lose eligibility, because local authorities have to conduct audit checks at specific points in the year. So just this table is worth screenshotting if you're in that position. Tax-free childcare. Okay, this is my favourite one, I have to say. I love tax-free childcare. So what is it? Also, it's really underutilized. So we're talking about it loads more. I think 800,000 people who are eligible are not using this scheme. And I think potentially it's because people think it's only for small children, and it's not. You can use it up to the age of 11, I believe. So it allows you to get £500 every month, so a total of £2,000 off your childcare bill potentially. And that is double to £4,000 a year if your child is disabled. And it can be used to pay for childminders, nannies, play schemes, nurseries, but also like after school clubs, summer holiday camps. If these people are registered with Ofsted and are using the scheme, then you are allowed to use tax-free childcare to get the money off. Essentially, for every £8 that you put into your childcare account, the government tops it up by £2. So how do you apply? Again, it's the childcare account, so it's the same account. If you have a child who say you're going back to work before they're eligible for the funded hours, you can use this tax-free childcare scheme beforehand and start getting a discount even though you don't get the funded hours yet. And you can also use both of them together. So absolutely use both at the same time, totally allowed. You can also use these schemes and the funded hours split between different providers if you want. That is possible as well. As I said, you can't open this account until 31 days before you're due back on work for tax-free childcare. And you just need your passport, P60 or a recent payslip. For the self-employed, you need your UTR number. And then how does it work? So this is inside my account. You can see I'm quite chaotic with my payments. Just whenever I have the money, I'm like, I'll chuck it in the childcare account. So essentially, all of your payments for your childcare providers come out of this account. You don't pay them directly from your bank account. I've made that mistake before. You just pay them from this account. So I've deposited £250 and £200, and you can see the government has topped up the amounts that I've put in. And then I have paid my provider directly out of my account. And you can see I've set the frequency, so you can do it monthly or weekly. And when the date that I want the money to come out the account, it's brilliant. I really think it's a really good scheme. Well worth using. And then this is just to put into context, like how much you can save using these schemes. So this is just my personal numbers. So 3 days a week currently costs me, well, £871.09. With the funded hours, it then came down to 710.47. And then plus childcare, tax-free childcare, I got it down by £302 a month. I am saving. So well worth doing. Do sign up, do use them both. Childcare is so expensive. We want everyone who is eligible to use them as much as possible. And if you are above the thresholds, do think about putting a bit more money into your pension, because perhaps it's worth it to have access to both of these accounts. Yeah, and particularly if you have 2 children, 3 children, this discount becomes really meaningful. So some final FAQs. Can you overpay into your tax-free childcare account? So like, how do you get the maximum amount of money in the savings? You can overpay, but all the money needs to be spent on the childcare eventually. So you can still overpay and claim the maximum top up, but it has to be used on childcare. And if you withdraw the money when you want, you're only going to be withdrawing the money that you put in. You're not going to be withdrawing the money with the top up fee. So you can't really game the system that way. Absolutely, you can use both schemes at the same time, but if you're on universal credit and you're using the aspect that helps with childcare costs, you can't use tax-free childcare at the same time as that universal credit childcare help. So do a bit of costings and work out what's going to be most effective for you. And you can start using your tax-free childcare account 31 days before you're due back to work. Okay, I think that's everything. Oh, it took me about 12 times to film this, so I hope that was useful. You're in the Nugget membership now, so thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, something I didn't answer, something you found confusing, hit us up in the community chat. That's the huge part of the value of this membership. Harriet and I hang out there. We answer every single question ourselves. So yeah, if some of this didn't make sense, just let us know. And thank you for supporting Nuggets. And we love you lots. And I hope this was helpful. Okay, take care. Bye.